My greatest heroes lately are those who can live from the truest parts of themselves without fear or denial. Those who carry infinite space to see every perspective. Those who can return to love 1,000,000 times in a single day. I'm so inspired by our capacity to feel deeply and use every experience to learn how to hold one another with more grace. My baseline is this: I claim all that I am in this now. I speak my boundaries with ease, and it is always appreciated. There is space between an experience and my reaction. I know that my embodiment is medicine. My soul feels more seen than it ever has. And I know that emotional intelligence is at the root of all of this. Hello, my fellow Earth Angels. Thank you so much for being here and joining me today. I looked up the definition of emotional intelligence, and the interwebs tell me that emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. And I feel like that is such an on-point definition. Emotional intelligence is something that has allowed me to feel a lot more confident and move through the world with grace and ease. So I wanted to share some more of my tips. I'll have different titles in the timeline below if you want to find what could be specifically helpful to you. But I wanted to start off with conversational awareness and how not to be an energy vampire. So if someone is repeatedly looking around and not making eye contact with you, looking extremely uninterested, distracted, or like their eyes are just looking through you, if they've repeated, "Damn, that's crazy," for like the 5th time in a row and haven't added anything to the conversation, those are probably signs that whatever you're sharing isn't really landing, or they just don't want to talk. Take moments of pause when you're sharing things, especially if you're going on long rants or explaining a long story. Just take a moment to tune into how the room is feeling and just be aware if your energy is being matched or if it's not. And this isn't anything personal, but I think specifically with new people or strangers, sometimes there can be a tendency to trauma dump or complain about something to find a point of relatability, but sometimes that complaining can last for like an hour long. And if the other person isn't also mutually excited and on that same energy, then you could just be talking their ear off. And that's just not really respectful. It's something that, as someone who is deeply empathetic and a very deep listener, if I'm listening to every word that you say and you're not really making a point, then that can feel really exhausting for me. And I realize that it is actually kind of disrespectful to take up someone's time without their consent and just dump energetically onto them. When you take time to pause in between your thoughts, you're really allowing those thoughts to land, you're allowing people to process them, and then they can also share from a really honest place. I think that sometimes the endless ranting and talking in a million different directions without making a point or having any general idea of where you're going with things can come from a place of being afraid of the silence, not feeling comfortable in quiet spaces, so feeling the need to fill up every moment with noise. And it almost can feel like that is the monkey mind that is being blasted out loud. And it's a really beautiful thing when you can kind of just witness the moment and be in the silence and be in the stillness and have this beautiful rhythm where you're both feeding into the energy of the conversation. And it does feel really nice when someone is making a point towards something. Next, I wanted to talk about breakups because so many different emotions can arise when partnerships are ending. And I want to invite you to be the meditative witnessing voice once again. And I know that that can be really hard to say, but when someone is breaking up with you, they are in some way speaking their truth, and they might have had a completely different experience that you had throughout the entire relationship, but their experience is still valid no matter how hurtful. And if anything, it's a really good indicator that they weren't being seen and that maybe you weren't being seen either. You have the opportunity to really honor them as a sovereign being and show your embodiment in that moment. Like if you loved someone the best that you could and they still couldn't reciprocate that energy or didn't love you as you were, that doesn't change anything about you. That doesn't change how beautiful, worthy you are, your capabilities of being in a safe and loving partnership in the future. The trajectory of your life doesn't have to completely change. Even all that is really being shared is that someone didn't see you as their medicine. And releasing them with grace is literally the most energetically attractive thing you can do, because no one is ever really ours to own anyway. And I think that in really codependent relationships, my breakups have been much harder, or the one breakup that I had, because I felt like my whole life depended on a person. But since stabilizing myself from within, from my own unified plane of love, and having connections of safety and comfort all around me in the form of friendships, it didn't matter as much when a romantic partnership ended, because I knew that I was going to be okay, that I was held by my community, that my life had a lot of beautiful things in it beyond just this one person. It's almost better to hear someone speak their truth and just be like, you didn't feel what I was feeling, you didn't have the same trajectory for us than I did. Like, damn, that is really painful, but it's also good to know, because I saw you as my everything and that energy wasn't being matched, and I know that I deserve that. So like, I release you. Also, loving someone so unconditionally that you do want the absolute best for them, even if it's not you. And I want to say that there are times when you can protest against the breakup and just be like, no, let's try to mend this. And that should only happen, I feel like, when you know that there are certain things in the partnership that can be addressed and shifted and changed, not because you just want the comfort of someone else, but if you see that there are little things that you can change in your own life, or your partner can change to work together in a more loving way, then there is potential there. And maybe the breakup was just the first time certain things were coming to light. However, if there are huge conflicts of interest that kept coming up throughout the relationship and then they were finally addressed, it's like those things are just going to keep resurfacing. And there are certain things about people, I feel like, that can't change. So even though it's really painful, I recommend just taking that information for what it is. And a lot of times it is just neutral. This person doesn't like to go on hikes and stare at the stars, and that's something that I want from my life partner. Of course, heavy feelings are going to arise, and that's okay. And I recommend maybe even vocalizing those things. You made these commitments to me, you led me on, speak your fucking truth and let all of those feelings out. But then at a certain point, there's no point in continuing to guilt trip someone once you've already said those things. Then I recommend doing practices to express and release that rage or that sadness with yourself or with your friends, and give yourself permission to feel all of it, and also permission to release it and move it through. I think that sometimes when people go through breakups, they automatically victimize and villainize everyone in this situation. And just because someone broke your heart by speaking their truth, that doesn't make them a villain, as hard as that is to hear. And also, you may want to flirt with their friend, post thirst traps, just get validation from other people. But a lot of times when you are acting out of this place of fear, of insecurity, you will just feel even more empty after, because those aren't real forms of support and love. And so when you have the desire to do things like that aren't, high vibe or in your highest alignment, I recommend taking a moment to pause and choosing something that is fully anchored in love, that is actual grounded support, like having a date with your sisters every day of the week, like cooking yourself a delicious meal, like booking 2 therapy appointments a week rather than 1, something that is way more rewarding than just getting some guy's validation, because that shit is so easy. I feel like it doesn't really mean that much that someone thinks that you're physically attractive. It's like, honor those connections that deeply see your soul, give you the love that you are truly worthy of. Next, I wanted to talk about friendships, and I have often found myself in groups of women, a friend group, if you will, and something that can happen occasionally is that one person in the friend group will come to talk talk to me about someone else in the friend group, and it makes me feel really uncomfortable when that happens because it does feel like a form of gossip, and it feels like we're talking about this person that we love behind their back. And so something that I try to practice is to not say anything about someone that I wouldn't be okay with them hearing. If they were in the room, could I still hold the same energy? And that's something that I try to invite. If someone else does come to me venting about someone that I love, I'm just like, why don't you talk to them about it? Like, have you discussed these valid feelings with the person that you're having these problems with? And the first person that you should go to with these stories is the person who's involved in that narrative and who maybe triggered you or spoke to you the wrong way. Instead of telling everyone around you and maybe perpetuating some narrative about this person, just going to them and being like, I didn't like this. Can we talk about it? If the friendship is a container for growth and unconditional love, then it's so safe to express the little hurts and refine your ability to communicate together. And sometimes maybe you do just need to vent or rant about someone that you love. And I recommend doing that outside of the group of friends, doing it with your therapist or your mom. I feel like your mom, as you get older, is a great person to tell things to. My mom has Alzheimer's, but my sister always used to call her and just talk for hours, and my mom would just be like, oh my God, that's so crazy. What? That's crazy. That's like one of the main things that she says is, what? That's crazy. And my sister would be able to just get things off of her chest, and my mom was just happy to be there and listen and not really retaining the information at all, but just a listening ear. So I just think that that's kind of sweet. Now, I'm very sensitive and I can't really stand it when people are passive aggressive to me or straight up just aggressive. But if there are snarky little comments being made at me or just little jabs, I have to speak to it right away. And I recommend that you do the same, because oftentimes when people are being passive aggressive, there's just a big area of hurt that hasn't been communicated, and you can invite them to share because it'll be way less painful than receiving these hateful, spiteful energies. So this happened to me a few weeks ago where I was like, hey, I was telling you about something I was really excited about, and you responded in such a sarcastic way that really hurt my feelings and made me feel like maybe you're kind of upset with me or hurt in some way that you haven't communicated. So I just want to maybe give you the space to share. I love you so much, and if there's anything that you need to express, I'm happy to hear it. It doesn't have to come out in that tone or that spiteful way. So if you want to talk about anything, I'm open, and usually that's just so well received. And if someone tries to brush you off or call you too emotional for trying to heal these conversational rifts or past incidents so that you can return to a neutral space again, what you can say is, I'm actually not being emotional right now. I'm simply taking into account our repeated lack of communication that leaves us bumping heads and feeling like shit. And I am really curious about how we can work more efficiently together. And I would love to discuss this in a really neutral and loving way, because I think that both of our time is so precious, and I really want to have a good experience with one another. That's what I'm focused on. I'm focused on growth and healing, and it doesn't have to be emotionally charged. So if you are feeling like this is too much for you right now, I would love to revisit it at a future time. And if you're not capable of holding this conversation, then we might have to make some shifts in our relationship, because I cannot continue moving forward in the way that we have in the past. Super neutral, super just like, these are the car facts. This is what's happening. I don't want this same result, so let's make a change. You can even just say that. So to know and trust yourself also means that you're not going to shrink, dilute, or change yourself in any situation. You're going to show up fully in your power no matter what you're confronted by, and it's definitely a practice. Something that really helps me to remember my power in different situations where I may be feeling kind of nervous or anxious is to roll my shoulders back, open my chest, feel my crown just connected to the heavens, and making direct eye contact, having the ability to take up space, like not being afraid to really take up space where I am physically, and that helps me to take up space energetically, asking questions, being inquisitive and curious, especially if I'm around tons of people who know way more than me. It's just an opportunity for me to learn and be teachable. And also, if someone wants to kind of dumb you down, I've been in many conversations with men where I will present some information and then they will immediately tell me that it's wrong or incorrect. And in the past, I would just be like, oh, okay, yeah, totally. And then I would go home and double check and be like, actually, I was right in that. And I knew that I was right, but I just let this guy take over the room. But now I would just be like, actually, a new article came out recently saying that da 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 da. So I can see that maybe your research isn't as up to date. And I will clap back and not let someone else dumb me down or treat me as one-dimensional. Yes, women can be intelligent and intellectual, and I'm not gonna let you feed your ego by just regurgitating the same thing I just said while making me feel stupid for saying it, which has happened so many times in my life. Also, being teachable and being humble when you do get things wrong. Hello from me on the other side. I just wanted to mention one more thing about confidence and social anxiety. I used to get anxiety about whether I would be accepted in new spaces, the fact that I had to introduce myself to new people, would we get along, would there be a point of relatability? All these questions would come up, you know? Classic social anxiety. And what shifted for me was I have an endless capacity for love and curiosity, and if I shift my perspective to I just want everyone here to know that I'm a safe space and that I can hold them, that changed everything. So whenever I go to a new space, a party, a gathering, I make sure to introduce myself to everyone in just like a casual way, but not because I want their validation, but mostly because I want them to know that I'm safe for them. Like I'm that person they can go to if they feel awkward, if they just want to talk or work something through, and that they can come to me and have a safe, loving experience. And that changed so much for me. So maybe try to shift that mindset. There's so much potential for connection and learning if we break through some of those mental projections. And lastly, I didn't know what category to put this into, but if you have a sexual desire that you want to present to your partner or someone that you are being intimate with, I really like this format: desires, boundaries, and fears. My desire is to see a dominatrix. There's this really deep part of me that wants to be explored. My boundary is that I don't want any physical touch. I just want to explore my ability to trust and surrender. And my fear is that you'll completely reject this part of me and make me feel really isolated and ashamed of what I crave. It's really simple, it's really to the point, and then the person receiving that can also use that same format: desires, boundaries, and fears, and it can just be a really neutral and loving way to present something that you want to explore in your life. I'm gonna answer just a few of your questions. So was there ever a moment of turning point where you suddenly felt mature, or was it gradual? And it's definitely both. I used to hate myself and be a complete pushover and let everyone walk all over me. And there were definitely some experiences, mostly ones where I felt immensely sad to the point where I had to start realizing I could not go on like this, letting people treat me in these ways. And so I think chapter 1 was the realization that, like, wow, I don't stick up for myself. I'm not actually good to myself, and so other people aren't good to me. And then the second chapter was just finding enough confidence and self-love to know that I'm worthy of stating my own boundaries and not allowing disrespect in my life. And I think that one of my major turning points in only allowing high quality nourishment was actually when I was around 17 or 18, and my friend would always be so passive aggressive towards me and secretly just, I feel like, just hated me or was jealous or didn't like me in some way. And so she would make really snarky remarks to me all the time. And I smoked weed a little bit at the time, and I remember one night I was kind of stoned and she was just being so mean to me. And so we were on the subway together and I literally was just having life-ending thoughts and ideations because of the way that she was treating me, and I was realizing like, whoa, I'm having a really intense reaction and I'm too sensitive for people like this. And so I just had to end that friendship, and from that moment on, I never allowed that kind of mean girl energy or attitude into my life where it's like, oh, I'm just joking, but really they're insulting you. So that was a really big turning point, as well as living in this house with tons of other embodied women who were really good at speaking their boundaries. This was like a year ago at 23 that I learned that I can be loved in all of my feelings, in all of my seasons, you know, because I was so held by these women. And they also just taught me that it's so easy to say yes and no, and that it's not personal. I just learned and saw through them how to speak boundaries and take up my own space. So that was a major turning point. I had so many moments where I just cried in my room alone because of how safe I felt in that house. And that's the first time I've ever felt safe in a household. How to catch yourself in the moment, reacting out of fear, and how to change that. So for me, I normally tune into my body, and when I'm acting out of fear, I often feel anxiety, I often feel avoidance, or just this feeling of lack. And so in the moment, I will completely stop whatever I'm doing or however I'm acting out of that fear. I just end all of it. I take a step back and I go right to the root of it. Like, wait, what is really going on here? So whatever your anchor is, whether that's your breath or movement or calling a friend, just acting out of love in that moment will help you to shift out of the fear and narrative and motivation that's taking place. Also validating the F out of yourself, like, whoa, everything that I'm feeling is so valid, and or I did something bad, I did something wrong, but I know that I'm still worthy of love. I forgive myself for being on this journey and making mistakes, and I vow to be teachable. I vow to learn from this lesson, and I honor the fact that I am just a soul evolving, and this is just information that I will take into account to better myself, to better hold space, to better love. And thank you, God, for showing me this area of my psyche. Last one, I just thought this was kind of funny because I screenshotted this from Instagram that someone asked me, and then my friend was literally talking about the same thing in the car. So I get set off by things around me and can't get out of the funk. Example, my boyfriend forgets to do dishes and I think, am I in the right relationship, and can't leave the funk. So my friend was telling me this was her exact experience, that her partner would leave dishes for days at a time, and she considered breaking up with him because she brought this to his attention. Like, can you just do the dishes, you know, within 24 hours after you get them dirty? And the boyfriend would always respond in this really angry, annoyed way, like she was just bickering him like a mother. But it got to the point where she did communicate, I am thinking of ending this partnership because I feel disrespected every single time you're not tending to our shared space and taking energy away from me by making me do it at the end of the day. And that really made him snap into gear, like, oh my God, that my behavior is literally pushing someone to their edge. It is just basic respect to clean up after yourself, especially within 24 hours. So if it needs to go there, I feel like maybe it should go there. I validate you in your experience, and I hope that until I see you next, you can continue to speak your boundaries. I cherish you. Your energy is so worth protecting, and I'll see you in a video soon. Bye.